I'm Jessie Heredia, and you're listening to Soul Care for the New Mom, a podcast designed with new moms in mind, where we talk about what it looks like to thrive in motherhood as the free, confident, joy-filled women God has called us to be. Hey ladies, today's episode is a recording from a recent Facebook Live that I had going on in my Facebook group that was part of my 3-day Empowered Wife workshop. In this live, I talk about this idea of being an empowered wife. I talk about why this matters for our marriage and for our family. A big part of what I believe and encourage through my coaching is this idea that for all of us, whether as moms or wives or entrepreneurs or even just as believers, I believe that for all of us, it's the being, meaning who we are becoming. It's the being that is far more important than our doing. So anytime I'm talking with women, my goal really isn't to give out a million things to put on their to-do list, but really it's to give them the most transformative, powerful mindset shifts that they might need in order to actually become who God has created them to be. Now, this is a big part of what I do. It's something I truly am so passionate about. So that comes out in today's Facebook Live that you're about to hear. But really, the big focus of this live in particular, now remember, this was just the first out of 3 different videos. This was a 3-day workshop. The first video, the one that you're about to listen to, is all about being empowered for connection, meaning how to be a wife who is able to confidently and even creatively use her authority in her marriage to cultivate true connection with her husband. You'll be hearing a lot about my own journey as a wife. You'll hear why I love talking about this specific topic. And what I most hope you take away from this episode is this belief that you do have a say in the trajectory of your marriage. You do have a say in how you connect with your husband, how you respond to your husband, how you prioritize intimacy even during a time when you maybe don't want that connection or that intimacy. Speaking of intimacy, this recording is just from the first day of the workshop, and the second day was actually all about intimacy and what it means to be more empowered for pleasure in your marriage. So if you are not already in my Facebook community and you want to watch the rest of these workshop videos, they are still up in the Facebook group, and you are more than welcome to join by either clicking the link in today's show notes, or you can just search for Soul Care for the New Mom in your Facebook app. All right, I'm so excited for you to get to listen to this. Without further ado, let's dive in. All right, ladies, it is happening. It is time to kick off the Empowered Wife workshop series that I am so excited about. This may be the workshop that I am most excited about out of all the workshops that I've done in the past. This one, I think, takes the cake. Hey, Rachel, I'm so glad you joined in. Hey, Edith, man, you guys are prompt. I've literally been going for less than a minute. Already got people hopping on in. I'm so excited. Okay, we're going to have a lot of things to cover. Thankfully, I've broken down each thing into 3 different days. So today we're talking about being empowered for connection in our marriage, meaning emotional connection, physical connection, maybe even spiritual connection. Hey, Lindsay, I'm so glad you're here. Tomorrow we'll be talking about being empowered for pleasure. And when I say pleasure, I do mean sexual pleasure. We're going to go into all of that, because where else can you have those conversations besides here in Soul Care for the New Mom, where I'm willing to go there. And we're going to be really talking about, what do you do when you don't have the drive, when you don't have the desire, when you don't have the pleasure that you once had in the bedroom? What do you do to continue to have a thriving sex life, especially when you are struggling with those things? And I'm going to be sharing a lot of my story, but I'm also going to be giving you tangible, practical things that you can be doing to increase the pleasure and also increase the desire for your husband and your marriage. And then on the 3rd day, we will be talking about being empowered for purpose, meaning what does it look like to confidently pursue God's purpose for our marriages? What does it look like to really prioritize the things that matter most in our relationship, the values, the calling, the things that God is, stirring in us as families, as, a couple, as husband and wife. We're going to be diving into all of that as well. But like I said, today is all about connection, building that solid, healthy level of connection that honestly I think can easily suffer in this season of motherhood. I know that a lot of you ladies are very much like me, like you have littles. My kids are 3 and 1.5. So we've been, parents for just a few years, not a huge amount of time, but long enough to get into this sort of rhythm where, you become so accustomed to being a parent that sometimes, you have to be extra intentional to remember that you are also a spouse. And I know that for me and for so many of you guys, it can be easy to struggle to like figure out how to fulfill both roles and how to fulfill them well. And connection with our spouses can easily fall to the wayside. It can suffer because of that tension that we experience. So we're going to be diving into all of that. But before we do, if you would just tell me in the comments what you're most looking forward to from this workshop, what you most are hoping to take away from it, because I just want to see what you guys are most looking for, to see, maybe you guys, maybe you'll notice that some of you are actually looking for the same things. So you can encourage one another, you can find community together. And I promise you that whatever we talk about in these sessions, you are not alone. If you're listening to me and there's something that I say that makes you think like, oh man, I'm struggling with this. I hear you, Jessie. I want what you're saying, but I just don't feel like I'm there yet. That's okay, because you're not the only person who's thinking those things. I promise you, you are not alone. And that's why we're doing this workshop, so that everyone can come together and really discover what it looks like to step out of this stuck mentality and to really pursue solutions. So Rachel just said that she's most looking forward to getting tips for connecting with hubby. Yes, we are going to be all about that today. Lindsay says, I'm hoping to be the best wife for my husband and my best self as a wife. I love that. And I'm going to give you a challenging thought that I really want you to chew on. And this isn't just for Lindsay, this is for everyone who's watching today. I think that one of the keys to being your best self as a wife is being an empowered wife. I really do believe that. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. What does it mean to be empowered? Before we talk about what it means to be empowered, I want to talk about what it means and what it looks like to not be empowered, because I really want to paint a picture for you guys of where I was during a season of my life where I was not an empowered wife, where I was not being the wife God was calling me to be, because I think that so many of you ladies might be there, or you might resonate with certain parts of my story. And I want you to see that that's where I was, in order for you to understand and to believe that it's possible to get to the next best thing, which is being a thriving, empowered, healthy wife. I want you to see that it's possible to make that shift, to experience that transformation. Shanna says, I'm looking forward to hearing how I can be confident with having sex when it comes to overcoming disliking my body right now. And that's huge for a lot of us women, isn't it? Edith says, I want to be the best wife and more understanding, as well to be able to talk without being rude to my husband. Yes. And girl, let me tell you, I was the queen of being rude. Actually, my husband will probably tell you that there are a few days where I can still be quite rude. And I have to catch myself in those moments, especially when it's like right at that time of the month where, there's like those few days right before my period comes where I can kind of get into this different zone. I'm this almost like this different person. But it is still possible to not just, catch yourself in those moments, but to also like know how to stop yourself from getting to that point. So let's go ahead and talk about what an empowered wife is not. And this is coming from my own experience. This is who I was just a few years ago. This is something that is so hard to talk about sometimes, but I think it's important that we do talk about it, because a lot of you ladies are feeling alone in this, and you don't have to be. So a wife who is not empowered is a wife who is always fighting for control. A wife who is not empowered is a wife who is always fighting for control in very unhealthy ways. That might look like nagging. That might look like controlling. That might look like creating rules and creating laws in your household that just don't make sense. It might look like neediness. A wife who is not empowered is a wife who resorts to anger very quickly, who resorts to anger way more so than peace. And that was me, you guys. A wife who is not empowered, and empowered, another word for that is confident. A wife who is not empowered and not confident is a wife who is quick to blame others. quick to point fingers. And girl, I was the queen of pointing fingers. If I was having a huge meltdown, I'm an emotional mess, got mascara running down my face, I'm feeling like the most worthless piece of scum on the earth, I didn't think it was my fault. I would say, you made me like this. You did that thing. Now look at me. I'm a mess. I need you to da-da-da-da-da-da. I was the queen of pointing fingers and playing the blame game. So if you're there right now, trust me, you're not alone. You're not alone. A wife who is not empowered is a wife who is slow to take ownership, quick to blame others, and slow to take ownership of her actions, of her emotions, of the way that she lives her life, her decisions. A wife who is not empowered is a wife who is insecure when it comes to sharing her heart and also sharing her body with her husband in her marriage. A wife who is not empowered is hesitant or afraid or doesn't, does not allow herself to fully share her heart and her body with her spouse. A wife who is not empowered feels stuck the way that she is, feels powerless, feels like she doesn't have a say in what she does, and she also doesn't have a say in the trajectory of her marriage. She doesn't have a say in where her marriage is headed. She's just along for the ride, and it's all going downhill real fast. That's what not being an empowered wife might look like. So after I've said all of that, show of hands with a little hand-raising emoji if you have been this wife. Have you been this wife? Or maybe are you currently this wife right now? Yeah, I see Edith, she had a little hand raise, and that's okay, girl. You're not the only one, because like I said, this was me, and it was really hard to look at myself in the mirror and to see these things. Lindsay has a little hand raise. Yeah, and it's okay. I want you to sit for a minute and to remind yourself it's okay. Because just because you might be a certain kind of wife today doesn't mean that you will be that certain kind of wife tomorrow or next week or next month or next year. Whoever you are today is not the same as who you will be in the future. And I think that sometimes we have to really grasp that. We have to really begin to let ourselves believe that. Rachel had another hand raised. Okay. So that is what a not empowered wife might look like. Controlling, plays the blame game, doesn't know how to take ownership, very quick to anger, very slow to apologize. Let me tell you, apologizing is something I've had to really learn over the years because I used to be the worst apologizer. I would rather play the silent game for 2 days straight than to apologize because there was a lot of pride. There was a lot of this desperation for control in me, and for some reason I thought that if I apologized it meant that I wasn't going to fix this thing. I needed people to suffer before I apologized so that we would make sure that we wouldn't go through the same thing again. That is not the action. Those are not the actions of an empowered, confident, healthy wife. Those are the actions of a wife who's afraid. Those are the actions of a wife who's not confident. Okay, so let's keep going forward. I see that a few more people are hopping in. I'm so glad you guys are here. We just covered what being an empowered wife is not. Now we're going to talk about what being an empowered wife is. An empowered wife is, in essence, the opposite of all of those things. But I think what's most important for you to realize is that the reason why an empowered wife is able to be the opposite is because an empowered wife has both the knowledge and the confidence to not just take her marriage by the reins and steer it back to where it's supposed to be, but she also knows how to do it in a place of love and healthiness and confidence, and it comes from being able to really take her thoughts captive and replace those thoughts with what most produces peace. An empowered wife is a wife who has peace. An empowered wife is a wife who knows that she does have a say in her marriage. She does have a say in her actions. She does have a say in the words that she says to her husband, but it doesn't just come because she wants it to. It comes because there's this inner peace and this inner confidence inside of her that helps her stay grounded in truth when it's tempting to believe the lies, when she's able to stay grounded in love when it's tempting to become angry and to lash out instead. Lindsay says, I shut down at the smallest comment. That's interesting. I kind of want to explore that a little bit more. We might get to that. Edith says, I don't like apologizing, especially if my husband doesn't apologize to me, but I am slowly learning to apologize. And that's okay. Sometimes it does take a minute to learn how to do these things that maybe weren't modeled very well for us growing up. Let's go back to being an empowered wife. Why does this matter? My business coach once said, I think she said this in one of her workshops. She said, who you are being is far more important than what you are doing. And that it doesn't matter what you most need to do. What matters is who you most need to become. I'm going to say that one more time. Who you are being is far more important than what you are doing. This isn't about what you most need to do, but about who you most need to become. And I want to encourage you guys with this today, because I know that some of you have maybe tried to make your marriage healthier or stronger before. And maybe you did okay for a little while, but then you fell right back into old patterns. You fell right back into old habits. And I want you to know today, if you've had that, or if you currently are in that right now, I want you to know today that's not because you need to do more things. It's because you need to become something else. You need to become more confident and become more empowered. It's not about what you need to do. It's about who you still have not yet become. And that's okay. An anxious, insecure wife who is trying to make her marriage healthier and stronger will end up spinning her wheels. She will end up trying to change her husband, trying to take control of every situation. And then in the end, she'll feel frustrated and helpless when things don't change. That's what an anxious, insecure wife experiences. But a confident and an empowered wife who is trying to make her marriage healthier and stronger. Remember, it's the same goal, but it produces two different results depending on who you are. The anxious, insecure wife spins her wheels, tries to control things, and then feels helpless because it doesn't work. A confident, empowered wife, she doesn't spin her wheels. She doesn't spin her wheels trying to change her husband. She doesn't spin her wheels trying to control the situation. She instead does what is in her power to grow and change herself. And not just herself, but how she responds to her circumstances, how she responds to those situations. And this is way more productive and produces way more fruit. So my goal through all of these videos, through this 3-day workshop, isn't to give you a million to-dos. Like, I'm not going to give you a ton of homework. You got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do these things. But really, I want to give you the most transformative, powerful mindset shifts that you might need in your marriage in order to become that empowered wife. Okay, I just saw that a few more ladies hopped in, so I'm so glad you guys are here. And we're just about to dive into our worksheet answers. So when we're talking about being empowered for connection, I want us to start by looking at what your role really is in your marriage when it comes to the level of connection in your marriage. And we're going to talk about how your beliefs and your thoughts are what most influence that. So going back to the worksheets, I hope that you guys brought them. One of the questions I asked was briefly describe 1 to 2 moments in which you've recently felt connected to your husband. And I also asked that if you're able to really think back to those moments, what were some of the thoughts that you might have had as you were feeling connected? And I gave some examples, some thoughts like, I love him, he's so good to me, he really knows me, he's there for me, he's my best friend. If you guys filled out the worksheet, or even if you didn't, but you're able to answer now, I want you to put your answers in the comments so that we can talk about this. I'll repeat the question one more time for those of you who are just hopping in or maybe missed that. I want you to write in the comments, maybe even just one moment in which you've recently felt connected to your husband. You don't have to go into a huge amount of detail, but just maybe like, just a couple words of what you guys were doing. Maybe it was when you were laying in bed. Maybe it was when you were on a car ride. You were maybe listening to music together. Maybe it was when you were cooking dinner, or you were playing with the kids. Whatever it was where you recently felt connected to your husband. And then I want you to think about the thoughts that you might have had as you were feeling connected. Edith says, wow, I really love him and I care deeply. I love that. And I feel like for me, a lot of the time, my thoughts go back to, wow, you still make me laugh. Like, that's a big one for me because, one of the things that I first appreciated about my husband was his sense of humor. So anytime that he makes me laugh, anytime that he says something that just kind of, puts a smile on my face and makes me chuckle, it reminds me he's still that guy. He's still that guy who swept me off my feet with his incredible charming sense of humor that, was kind of quirky, kind of awkward, but it was part of why I loved him. Lindsay said, when we took time to sit and talk about things on our minds and we were open and honest, I kept thinking that I loved we were able to be so open, honest, and forgiving. I love that. I especially love that you wrote forgiving, because how often do we sometimes feel things or think things that we're nervous about, we're embarrassed about saying out loud. We're hesitant to really bring those things to our partners because we don't want to be judged, we don't want to be criticized. We think, oh, like they won't get it. And I love that, like, you had that moment of feeling like, wow, we really can be open and honest and forgiving. That's huge. Molly says, my husband and I were sitting at the bar in our kitchen sharing what we've learned in the Word after the kids went to bed. I thought, wow, he's so encouraging. I'm so thankful for his guidance and friendship. Oh, I love that. I love that you even use the word friendship, because I think it's important to maintain that friendship. Taylor says, I felt connected lately when we started doing a Sunday check-in. We talk about the schedule for the week, our budget, any issues in our marriage or communication, and I feel that he hears me. We are on the same page. I love him. I understand him. Oh, I love all of that. I especially love he hears me. Isn't that just something that a lot of us women, we just want to know? We just want to know in our core that we're heard, that that we're seen, that we're heard, that we're known. I love that. And Yanira says, hanging out with him in our playroom, just watching a movie. He's so much fun to just be with. He brings me comfort and so much joy. I love that. Okay. All right, ladies. Well, now that you've shared your moments, now I want to ask you, the next question on the worksheet was, if you were to point a finger at who was responsible for those moments of connection, who would you be pointing at, you or him? And there's no right or wrong answer. I just want to kind of take a look into, maybe what was going on in the moment. Was it more so you that, made sure that time was carved out? Was it you who kind of brought that moment into fruition? Was it you who made sure that connection happened? Who do you think was most responsible for those moments of connection? Was it you or was it him? Or maybe it was equally both. But if you notice there was maybe one more so than the other, put that in the comments and we'll see what you guys say. Yanira says both. Edith says me. Okay. Taylor says me. Molly says him. Okay. I love that. All right. So let's move on. Briefly describe 1 to 2 moments, again, this is from our worksheet, in which you've recently felt disconnected from your husband. And if you're able to list some of the thoughts you might have had in those moments of disconnect, such as he's not listening, he doesn't care, I'm all alone, he doesn't understand. I want you to write down what was a recent moment of disconnect that you experienced, and what were the thoughts that you had in that moment. Lindsay also said me. So it seems like a majority of you pointed to yourself in terms of who was most responsible for those moments of connection. So now we're talking about moments of disconnection. What were some moments where you felt disconnected? I'll go ahead and share mine. Recently, I say catching, but I've just been observing my husband on his phone a lot. And it got to the point where I needed to set some firm boundaries. And I told him straight up, either we can put the phone in a drawer when you're home and trying to be with the family, or we can go downgrade your phone and get you a dumb phone instead of a smartphone. Because the smartphone is very tempting, and it's hard to have that boundary. I felt very disconnected every time I looked over and I saw him on his phone. It just was like happening day after day. So that was a moment of disconnect that I had, and and there was some tension there. Edith says, wow, he doesn't care or doesn't see what I see. Okay. Taylor says, when I think he's checking out or trying to disengage. Okay. And Taylor, what's the thought that you have when he is checking out? Like, what is it that you think about him or think about yourself even? Lindsay says, most days are moments of disconnect. We don't have time for each other. What's the point? Okay. Yeah, we don't have time for each other. I think that's especially because you guys have I want to say a 3-week-old. So on top of also having a toddler, so I know what you mean when you say we don't have time for each other, because in those days of having a new little one, there really is a struggle to find that new rhythm. Not saying that you're not going to find it. I'm just saying that sometimes it can be a struggle. So it's okay that you're in that process of figuring that out. Taylor says his screen time drives me nuts. Okay. Yanira says when he was working lots of hours, he would get home tired and not want to hang out. I felt sad and I missed him. Joanna says he jumped to a conclusion when he walked into the room the other night. Okay. And tell me, Joanna, what was the thought that you had about him or about yourself in that moment? Was it, he doesn't understand? Was it, he never does it right. He never knows the right thing. He doesn't see me. What was the thought that you had when he jumped to a conclusion? Lindsay says mine does a lot of screen time as well. Well, ladies, well then you might need to. I mean, not saying that this is a one size fits all solution, but you might need to think about downgrading to a dumb phone as well, or at least implementing more boundaries as far as, hey, let's both put our phones in the drawer for a time. I think that's just like a simple solution that can be incorporated right away. Taylor says that her thought was he doesn't care or doesn't want to be with us. Joanna says mine is on his phone a lot too. Okay. He didn't take the time to care and to find out what was actually going on. Okay. And I hear like all of these moments that you guys are saying, like I've been in those moments. So I know what you mean. So now the next question is, if you were to point a finger at who was most responsible for those moments of disconnect, would you be pointing at you or at him? Who is most responsible for those moments of disconnect? Molly says, I brought the kids inside yesterday and he wanted them to stay out with him. I had cookies in the oven. They said, you always change things, you do your own way. And I thought, can I even live? I just wanted to have a treat when they came inside. And she thought things like, he doesn't see what I do for the family. That's huge. Yanira says, we flirt with each other on the phone often. Try it. I like that. So whenever your husband's just kind of checked out on his phone playing a game or whatever, just send him a flirty text of, hey, it'd be really sexy if you turned off your phone. I like that. Lindsay said both. Okay. Who was responsible for the disconnect in that moment? Both. Okay. What else do you ladies say? And give me your honest answer. Joanna says both. I love that. Okay. All right. What else? Who else thinks it was both? Or was it him or was it you? Who was most responsible for those moments of disconnect? Yanira says both at times. Okay. All right. I love that. Just from the sound of just those few answers of both, it sounds to me that you ladies already know deep down that like you can take ownership for things and that you are also responsible for things and that, it's a two-way street. Molly says me. Okay. Yeah. Probably me. Taylor says probably me for not stating my expectations and expecting him to read my mind. I love these answers. It shows humility. It shows honesty. I love that. Edith says both of us, but mostly him. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Sometimes it really is on them. Sometimes it really is on us. But no matter who it is on, an empowered wife still can take ownership for the level of connection, no matter what the situation might look like, no matter what moment occurs, whether it's a moment of connection or a moment of disconnection. An empowered wife is still able to take ownership. Again, speaking to what we talked about earlier, it's easy to point fingers. It's easy to put blame, to play the blame game. We can put blame on our spouses. We can even put blame on our circumstances. I know that for me, like when I first became a parent, one of my biggest excuses was, I just don't feel like being touched. I don't feel like talking to you. I don't feel like doing anything with you because just motherhood is just a lot on me right now. And that was, I guess, fair for me to say because it's true. Motherhood was a tough adjustment. When I first became a mom, I had no idea how much of me would go into being this parent. And I felt like I had very little left for my husband. But the longer that I said that, the more I was perpetuating this disconnect. Because instead of taking ownership of, okay, well, even though I might not feel like it, I can still implement some things to make sure we're keeping that connection alive. I wasn't taking ownership. I wasn't using the authority that I have So like I said, it's easy to point fingers. It's easy to play the blame game. It's easy to blame our circumstances or our spouses for moments of disconnect. It's harder to take ownership. It's harder to take responsibility, and even harder to use the authority and the ability that we have to then make changes and resolve things. But I will tell you, ladies, deciding that you are done with the blame game, and I don't just mean like I'm done blaming for today. I mean done blaming forever. Deciding that you are done with the blame game is one of the most powerful first steps that you can take to become that empowered wife in a thriving, healthy marriage that I know you ladies want to be. All the blame does is perpetuate negative cycles. It perpetuates the tension. It perpetuates the arguments. And it keeps you from doing what is in your power to cultivate a better marriage. As a coach, when I work with clients, I don't tolerate blame. I will never sit and listen. I mean, that's not what I get paid for. I don't get paid to sit and listen to your problems, to sit and listen as you talk about, oh, he did this, we blah, 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 like, and then he did that, and I was so mad, and I wish he would do this, and I wish he would change. He never understands what I need. I don't do that because I know that that doesn't serve you and that doesn't build your marriage. So instead of, tolerating blame, I will always challenge clients. I will always challenge the ladies that I work with. I always challenge you in these workshops and push you to look at yourself, to look inward, to really take ownership and use the authority that you have to make choices and to build habits that really do create lasting change. So this brings me to the next question that is on your worksheet. If being empowered also means having authority, and I put in parentheses the power or right to give orders and make decisions. If being empowered also means having authority, what might being an empowered wife with authority look like in terms of really building connection in your marriage? I'm going to give you guys a second to put your answers in the comments. And then after you do that, I'm going to go through your answers, and I'm going to share a few of mine that you might not have thought of. Please sit down, Lovey. And then we'll talk about more of that together. But again, I'll repeat the question for anyone who maybe doesn't have the worksheet in front of them. If being empowered in your marriage also means having authority in your marriage, what might being an empowered wife with authority look like when it comes to building connection with your husband? By the way, I'm so happy that you gals are here. Like, so happy, because I don't know, when I first started my Facebook group, when I first started Soul Care for the New Mom, period, the blog, the podcast, all of it, I really didn't know what community would look like. And now I'm starting to just see how beautiful it is. I'm really seeing community come into fruition through this ministry, through this business. And it really is just the most amazing thing. I love that, we're coming onto lives. I'm seeing some of you guys are regulars, and that tickles me pink. I know that Edith's always going to show up. I know that Molly's always there. Lately, Lindsay, she's like, hey, I've got a problem. I'm going to post about it in the group. And Lindsay, you've only been a part of the group for 1 or 2 weeks, and you already are making friends, and you're getting problems solved, and you're having conversations with women. And that just makes me so happy. So happy. I just saw that a few more people hopped in. Hey, Kristen. Hey, Christy. The question that I just asked, this was from the worksheet, is the question, if being empowered also means having authority, what might being an empowered wife with authority look like in your marriage when it comes to really building and cultivating connection? And that can be physical connection, emotional connection, spiritual connection, any type of connection that really brings you back together, even in tough times, even when you guys have little ones that are keeping you up all night long, even when you're new parents and you have no idea what the heck you're doing, even when you have zero sex drive, you're not even wanting to hold hands. What does it look like to use the authority that you have to build connection? Yanira says that her husband Brian gives me the freedom to plan special dates and getaways. He gets so excited that he doesn't have to plan something all the time. I love that. I love that you get to plan special dates and getaways. And what I love is that you love that. Because I think it can be easy for us to be like, why won't you plan this with me? I want you to be part of it. I want you to book the hotel. I want you to pick the restaurant. But I love that you're like, I'm good at this. I want to do this. So I'm going to plan our special dates and getaways. And you've taken ownership of that. You're like, I can do this and I don't have to gripe about it. I can actually be thankful for it. And we can both enjoy this time together. It doesn't have to be like, this perfect thing. It's just a time where you're building connection. Who cares who did the planning? I'm just glad that it's happening. That's huge. Joanna says stating needs, desires, and setting boundaries when needed. Ooh, I like that you mentioned setting boundaries. I don't know if you guys have ever read the book Boundaries by Henry St. Cloud and John Townsend, but it is a phenomenal book. I recommend it to almost everybody because we all have situations in our lives. We all have those relationships where we need to be better at setting boundaries. I mean, even just with our kids, even like from a toddler age, like it talks about, what kids need in different stages of life. It talks about this is how you set boundaries with a toddler. This is how you set boundaries with an adolescent. This is how you set boundaries with your adult children. This is how you set boundaries with your parents and your spouse and your friends and your boss and your coworkers. And reading that book a couple of years ago, my grandma actually gave it to me because I was dealing with a very stressful situation with a neighbor. And this neighbor was, we had built a friendship and she was elderly, and her children were not really in the picture. I couldn't quite figure out why. I later kind of figured out why. But we had built this friendship, but it got to the point where she was beginning to ask for money. It made me feel uncomfortable. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to love on her. I wanted to serve her. And my grandma recommended this book on boundaries, thinking that this was going to help me in that situation, which it did. But what it really did was it opened my eyes to, oh my gosh, I could be setting boundaries with everybody. I need to set boundaries with my husband because he's just, doing things and I'm just yelling about it. I'm lashing out about it. I'm nagging him about it. But none of that is helping because it's not actually setting boundaries. So I think setting boundaries is huge. Sorry, I just went on that huge tangent, but I think that it matters. Taylor said, making our relationship a priority, being able to express my own wants and needs while validating his, being able to support and love him fully and not carry any resentment, open communication, prioritizing date night, intimacy, and being equal partners. Yes, yes, and yes to all of that. Edith says, when we decide when we go out together or with friends and we talk about what we loved the most about it. I love that. Just like experiencing friendship, experiencing double dates, having fun with other people in our lives, and then talking about it together. I love that. Lindsay says, it would look like a confident woman that doesn't shut down, an open communicator that plans and sticks to our time together. That's huge. Ladies, if you don't think that you need a plan for spending time together, but you're struggling to spend time together, there's something going on there. You probably need a plan. It probably needs to be put on the calendar. And that's okay. It's okay to have to live by a calendar. That's just how you cope with busyness. That's how you cope with a crazy life of having little ones or, having all these different obligations and all these responsibilities. That's how you deal with that without letting your marriage suffer for it. Lindsay also says, date nights and going back to my fun self when we were dating. I love that. Molly says, it's silly, but my husband loves Kool-Aid, so I started having a glass of cold Kool-Aid ready for him when he gets home. He always smiles and says, you know me well, then gives me a kiss. Another thing that's working for us is saying, can we cuddle while we watch a movie with the kids, or we'll go to the basement to watch a movie after the kids go to sleep. I love that. I love all of these. Ladies, do not write these answers down and then not go out and make a plan for implementing these things. Do not write these answers down and say, this sounds nice. This sounds like what an empowered wife would do, and then not go do it. Because I am hereby dubbing you, I am giving you the title of empowered wife. You can decide today that you're done with the blame game, that you're done with the insecurity, that you're ready to walk with more confidence, you're ready to set more boundaries. Go sit on the potty, love bug. No. Yes, are you pooping? Go sit on the potty, love bug. Thank you. Guys, this is what being a work from home mama is like. I am telling you that you can decide today that you're going to take ownership and you're going to take massive action. Okay, so here's some other answers. I loved all of your answers. I loved every single one of them. Here's some more answers. Rearranging your budget to do more of what you love together. That's an idea. I think that it can be easy to say, well, we don't have the money to do dates. We don't have the money to go out. We don't have the money to go on a weekend getaway. Well, let me ask you, are you possibly spending $300-$400 on Christmas? And what if instead you were to decide, you know what, this year we're not doing Christmas. This year we're doing a romantic getaway because my soul and my soul needs it and our marriage depends on it. That is a decision for an empowered wife. That's an empowered wife's decision. And I'm not saying that that's, what you have to do. I'm not saying that, that you must go out and do that. I'm saying that it's an option. There's always an option. Being an empowered wife and being empowered for connection might look like setting boundaries on screen time, not just for them, because I know we talked about that earlier, but setting boundaries on yourself, deciding like from this time on, like, after the kids go down for bed, like we're done with the phones. I'm done with checking emails. I'm done with looking on the computer. I'm not going to be scrolling through Instagram. And this is hard for me because I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I post almost religiously on Instagram and Facebook every night at 9 p.m. because that is when I get the most engagement. That's when people are most online, or at least that's what I found to be true for my audience. So I always post at 9 o'clock. But here's the problem. My husband, he works at night. He does work the night shift, but he goes into work around 9:30. So at 9, right as we're winding down our time together, there were a couple months where like every night at 9 o'clock, my alarm would go off my phone. I'd be like, oh, it's time for me to post. And I also was like, oh, I have to engage with all these other posts because the more you engage, the more Instagram boosts you because of the algorithm. So I would spend 20 solid minutes like half-heartedly watching our movie, half-heartedly, scrolling through Instagram, putting my post out. Finally, like, just a couple weeks ago, after he had said to me, I'm so tired of seeing you on your phone. Like, why are you not here with me? Finally, I had to set a boundary with myself and say, you know what? I have either two options here. I can either pay for a scheduling system that will put my post out there for me right on time, right at 9 o'clock, or I can just bite the bullet and just wait until 9:30, 9:45 to put my post out. And if people like it, they like it. And if they don't, then they don't. But at the end of the day, that's not what's going to make or break my business. But it could be what starts to make or break my marriage. And I would much rather put my marriage first than put my business first, especially over something as little as getting engagement on a post on Instagram. So I don't know if that resonates with anybody. Joanna says, I'm so thankful that my husband values getting away with me and having romantic dates. This is one area where we are really good at. We also always do something big for our anniversary. I love that. How long have you guys been married? Everyone put in the post how long you guys been married. I'm like really curious to know. Or if you are not married, that's totally okay, but just how long have you been together? Okay, another thing that you might want to do in order to really cultivate connection, in order to really use the authority that you have, is to put things down on the calendar to make sure it happens. And when I say things, I don't just mean spending time together or going on dates together. I also mean putting sex down on the calendar if you have to. If that's just not something that's happening naturally, if it's not something that, is always made a priority, sometimes a week or two maybe goes by and you don't really give it a second thought, it's okay. We will talk about that more in tomorrow's video. That's what tomorrow's video is all about. But as far as really, using the authority you have to cultivate connection, I would say do what you can now to make sure that happens. And that might mean putting it down on your calendar. It might mean setting a reminder on your phone. It might mean making changes in your lifestyle that will help boost that desire. I also want to challenge you to look at, what are some habits that you could start to create to cultivate that connection together. So maybe, you're used to your husband getting home from work and you just saying, hey babe, glad you're home. And then there's like this, period of time where, he's decompressing, you're kind of like scrambling to get dinner ready or whatever. Maybe you can build a new habit where maybe when he comes home from work, you guys both sit on the couch together. And I don't mean like he sits on one end, you sit on the other. I mean like sitting close together. For me, that's a little bit hard because physical touch is not my love language. It's actually Grant's love language. And so I've had to decide in advance, I'm going to sit right next to him, even though I want my space. Don't be near me. You smell like hot dogs or whatever, because he works. Never mind. I'm not even gonna go into all that. But I have my own kind of things of I don't really want to sit right so close to you, but I've chosen to build a habit of doing it anyway. And I've seen how it helps build connection. It helps bring us together when it could be so easily to just miss each other, to just it's whatever. Craig Groeschel he has this quote. He says, "Successful people do consistently what normal people do occasionally." And I think that this can be so fitting for this conversation of building connection in our marriage. Successful people do consistently what normal people do occasionally. We don't want to just occasionally connect with our spouses. We want to be consistent with it. So I want you to ask yourself, as you're thinking about, how might I need to take more ownership? How might I need to use more of my authority? I want you to ask yourself, what are we doing occasionally that should probably be more consistent? And what does that look like? Another thing that you could be doing to cultivate more connection is learning how to diffuse stressful situations instead of adding fire to them. And that isn't so much about, building connections, more so about protecting your connection. Knowing how to diffuse stressful situations, diffuse tense moments, diffuse impending arguments, instead of adding fire onto them. And if this is something that you struggle with, it's okay. You are not the only one. I think that many people struggle with this. I have been there. I mean, that is, going back to the very beginning of the video when I talked about what an empowered wife is not. That was me. I was the person who would add fire. I would pour the whole thing of gasoline. I would, not just, throw a fit, and I'd be like, and it's your fault. And you da-da-da-da. And you're just like your dad. I would say whatever it was that would, create some more tension, because that was just my MO. That was the way that I was patterned. But once I learned how to take more ownership of my thought life, which brings me into this last part of today's video, once I learned how to take more ownership of my thought life, that was when I learned that I can diffuse stressful situations, that I can introduce more peace into my home. I don't have to add fire onto our fights. I don't have to perpetuate these negative cycles in my marriage. I do have a say in what happens in those times. I don't have to add fire onto it. So the last thing first let me read all your comments. So I asked, how long has everyone been together? Joanna says 3 years. Edith says been married almost 4 years, together 5. Taylor says 1.5 years. Yanira says 18 years. Oh, girl, I love that. Lindsay says 6 years married, but 10 years together. I love that so much. My husband and I have been together for, I want to say 6 years. We've been married for 4, going on 5. Okay, the last thing we're going to be talking about, and this is something I mentioned at the very beginning, you might not remember, but I talked about how, I'm actually going to go back in my notes so I can be sure I repeat it correctly. When we're talking about being empowered for connection, what I want you to do is not just look at your role when it comes to the level of connection in your marriage, but I want you to look at your beliefs and your thoughts and how those things most influence it. That was why in the worksheet I asked you guys, what are the thoughts that you have in those moments? What are the thoughts that you're having about your husband when you're feeling disconnected, when you're upset, when you're not, when you're not connecting right? That's why I asked, what are your thoughts? Because your thought life matters. Your beliefs matter. So the last questions on the worksheet were, what thoughts, fears, or lies about your husband/marriage would you need to deal with first if you're going to use your authority intentionally and properly? And I also asked, what thoughts, fears, or lies about yourself would you need to deal with? I'm going to give you guys a second to put your comments in the answers, and then we're going to talk about that. But while I'm waiting for you guys to share your answers, I'm going to share a little bit about this practice that I love to encourage all of my clients to do. In fact, I don't just encourage it, I basically assign it. It is something, I don't typically give, one-size-fits-all assignments to every single one of my clients, because everyone has different needs. We're working through different things. We have different goals. But every single one of my clients across the board, I make sure that I help them craft declarations. I help them create these statements of belief, these statements of confidence, because when they speak these over themselves, it doesn't just change their thoughts, it doesn't just change their emotions, it actually changes their behavior. Because if you are, let's use the example of, us in our marriage, us as wives. If you are a wife who is, constantly lashing out, who is constantly fighting for control, who is constantly adding fire onto stressful situations instead of diffusing them, if you are caught in those patterns, but you start speaking over yourself, I don't have to be that way, or, I am this instead. When you start to speak different things over yourself, you start to act in different ways. Instead of lashing out, you start to realize, oh, I don't need to lash out, because I already know that da 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 da. I don't know exactly, what would be what's causing you to lash out, but odds are that there's something that needs to be spoken to. There's a truth that you haven't yet spoken over yourself, and there's a lie that you've been believing instead and allowing to dictate your behavior, which is why, again, in the worksheet, I keep asking you, what are your thoughts? What are the thoughts that you're having? What are the beliefs? So let me see in the comments. Lindsay says, the lie about my husband I would need to deal with is that he doesn't care. And the lie about myself is I'm not worth it. And she said in parentheses, low self-confidence here. Girl, I promise you are not alone. You are not alone. And I've definitely had seasons of low self-confidence, especially when I, was at my worst, where my anger was at an all-time high, my anxiety was at an all-time high. I thought, no one should even be, I shouldn't even be in a relationship. Like no one should even want to love me, because this is just, I am too much. This is too much. And y'all, I'm an Enneagram 4, so I feel a lot. And those feelings, I wear them on my sleeve. I'm like, they're oozing out of me all the time, especially in my relationships. And I've definitely thought that as well. I'm not worth it. I'm just too messy. I'm just too much. And I wonder how many of you ladies also feel the same. All right, what else? What other thoughts or lies about your husband or about your marriage or about yourself do you need to deal with if you are going to be that empowered wife, if you are going to use your authority and build connection, if you're going to intentionally pursue connection with your husband? What lie or thought do you most need to deal with? Going back to what I was saying about speaking declarations, I'm going to share with you a couple of mine. What I believe about declarations is that they should be bold, they should be specific, and they should be very personal. So just because these are my declarations doesn't mean that they should be yours. Now, you might decide, wow, this actually speaks very much so to what I most need to believe these days. And if so, then great, then use it. But if there's something else that you're noticing in your marriage that you need to speak some more truth over that, I say come up with your own declaration, something that's bold, something that's specific, and something that's personal. So here are a few of mine. I am fighting with love for a better marriage and believe our best days are still to come. I started speaking this one over ourselves when we were really struggling in our marriage. We've been going to marriage counseling, I want to say, for about 9 months. And we're not still going because our marriage is in a tough place. We're still going because we're actually in a really good place and we want to make sure we stay there. And one of the things that, I struggled with when we first started going is this isn't going to help. We're a lost cause. The issues that we have, they're just there forever. If we haven't overcome them by now, it's just the way it is. There's just no changing us at this point. Those were the kinds of thoughts that I was telling myself. I didn't even realize I was thinking them, but it was just subconscious, and it came out in the way that I acted. It came out in the way I prioritized my husband. So I began to speak over myself and said, no. Our best days are still to come. Our best days are still to come. And reviving that hope really meant a lot to me. It changed a lot in me. Another one that I speak over myself, and this one may be very fitting for some of you, especially considering why you maybe wanted to come to this workshop. And my other declaration is, I am a beautiful, sensual being made one with my husband. That might sound weird, but I speak that over myself a lot, because there are still weeks where I don't always feel like I'm sexy. I don't always feel like sex matters. I don't feel sensual. I don't feel beautiful. I feel more beautiful now than I did a couple of years ago when I first became a mom. And I know that some of you ladies are there right now dealing with some body image, some struggles, with your self-worth and, looking in the mirror and not really recognizing yourself. So I began to speak over myself. I am a beautiful, sensual being made one with my husband. And what I noticed is that there were some mornings when I would say this over myself and I'd be like, kind of want my husband right now. And that might be weird for me to admit, but y'all, I'm saying it because it shows that there's power in the things we say. All right, let me read some of your comments. Edith says, one thing that nags me the most is my husband isn't emotional, or he doesn't show as much affection as I do to him. And I believe the lie that he doesn't love me as much as I do him. Okay, Edith, for you, I would say a declaration for you might look like something about Even if your husband is not emotional or doesn't show as much affection, I think that you can create a declaration that calls out the things about him that are true, the things about him that you can most recognize and appreciate in your marriage. Because I know before, you were talking about how there was a time, where you felt connected. And I want you to think back to what you felt in that moment, to the thoughts you had in those moments of connection. And I want you to see how you can maybe create a bold, specific declaration that helps you see your husband in a better light, that helps you remember why it is that you fell in love with him. I think that if you can do that, you can start to see that, you know what, him being not as emotional as me, that doesn't really matter, because instead of being that, he's these things instead. And those things are so amazing. So I just want to speak that encouragement into you. Joanna says, the lie about myself would be the fact that I'm the reason we've had problems in our love life because of my past. So for you, Joanna, I would say you might need a declaration about specifically that lie of, that feeling of I'm the reason, I'm the one to blame. I want you to think about, what does it look like to speak more truth and love and grace and compassion over myself when it comes to this. Yanira says, I would say my personal lie is that I don't need sex. I know we need more, so I need to get past that mindset. Yeah, I would say you absolutely can speak against that, and you can come up with a bold personal declaration specifically for helping you not only just see your need for sex, but also remember why you enjoy sex. I think sometimes we can let ourselves forget those things, especially when we're busy or when we just don't feel like it, or our body has changed. Or, I know you said that you guys have been married for, I think you said 18 years, and that's a long time. So I want you to think back, like, what was it like when we first started being intimate? And what was it about that excited me, and how might I want to do that? Another declaration I speak over myself is, I have the power to calmly set boundaries and cultivate peace in my home. This is one I speak over myself because, again, boundaries, it really matters. And I want to speak truth over myself when it comes to that. I don't have to set boundaries from a place of anger. I can set boundaries from a place of peace and from a place of calm. Another one that I speak over myself, I am my husband's kind and faithful helper, and I am stewarding my influence over him well. I've been speaking this over myself every day for the past month. This has been one of my new ones for 2020. And I speak this over myself because I think it's so easy, for me, now that I know I have influence, now that I know I have authority, I got to make sure I don't fall to the other extreme where I'm over the top in terms of my authority. Like, you need to be doing this. No, we need to be doing that. I don't want to get into that. I don't want to escape from nagging out of fear and then turn into nagging out of overconfidence. So I kind of need to, find that middle ground. And for me, it comes by me reminding myself that I can steward my influence over Grant, my husband. I can steward my influence over him well. I don't have to do it from a place of, control. I don't have to do it from a place of insecurity. I can just do it from a place of wisdom and love and grace. So here's your homework. First, there's two pieces to this homework. First, I want you to sit down and really map out what you want to be prioritizing and doing this next month when it comes to cultivating more connection in your marriage. I want you to think back through all the things that we talked about as far as practical steps you can take to really build that connection with your husband. I want you to sit down and map out what that looks like for you, not just for this next month, but also for this whole next year. Do you maybe need to, rearrange your budget? Do you need to save up for something? Do you need to plan more dates? Do you need to invite more friends over to have more fun together? Do you need to put sex down on the calendar? Do you need to, put boundaries on your screen time on your phones? So that's your first piece of homework. The second piece is come up with your marriage declarations. Come up with those bold personal statements that you'll speak over yourself and about not just yourself, but about your husband and about your marriage. And I want to encourage you to try this out as an experiment. Do this for 1 week, 2 weeks, and see what happens. The more you say this over yourself, don't just do it once in the morning. Do it throughout the day if you're able to. Set reminders on your phone. Do it when you first see him. Do it when you see him right at night. Do it anytime that you feel like I'm losing sight of who my husband is. I'm losing sight of why our marriage matters. And like I said, tomorrow we will be diving into being empowered for pleasure. We will be talking specifically about physical connection, and specifically, even more specifically, we'll be talking about sex. We'll be talking about, what does it mean to really, have a thriving sex life? How do we really gain that desire back if you feel like you've lost it? What do you do when you have a low sex drive, when you have a low libido? We'll be talking about all of that. But I do hope that today's video, I know it's been going on for a while, it's been an hour now, I think. I did not expect it to be this long, but I do think that this can be the start of a really powerful journey for you gals when it comes to being more empowered in your marriage and really cultivating more of the things that you most want to see. So I'm cheering you ladies on. If you have other thoughts or other questions, please feel free to put them in the comments, and I will see you guys tomorrow.